let's just talk about this draft as a whole real briefly. The draft class as a whole, there's some really talented guys at the top, but as we've talked about, the meat of this draft, 2, 3, 4, if you do some of those mock draft simulators like we talked about, Steve, to start the show, you start doing some of those on a regular basis, and you realize, man, there are some really good guys in this middle, class. But obviously, the big ticket names are at the top, and there are some big time receivers in this class yet again. This is like the 5th or 6th straight year where this wide receiver class is absolutely loaded. And, as we've talked about on previous shows, well, the Patriots, while their main needs are probably more on defense, let's not forget that receiver is still a need on this team, in my opinion. Who do you like most in this class? Forget if they would fall to the Patriots. Do you have someone in this class that you would really, really like?
Well, I think everyone who's been reading anything I've written recently would know my draft binky for this class is the kid from Alabama, John Mechie. I would love to see Mechie in a Patriots uniform. I think the chances of them being able to grab him are real. Most people think he'll either go in the 2nd or 3rd round. I think 2nd is probably more realistic. And that's with the realization that, he might not be bringing anything to the table in 2022. But he's the guy I really like. I think he would fit with what they like to do. He can play inside. He can play outside. He's dynamic when he gets the ball in his hands. And I really think that they have a shot at bringing him in.
Yeah, I think Mechie in the 2nd round, maybe even 3rd round. I think I've seen some projections where he could go in that range. I think he would be a great fit and what the Patriots need. And, at the top of this class, you talk about Garrett Wilson from Ohio State, Drake London from USC. Doubtful either one of those guys fall to the Patriots, I would say. It seems like both of them are probably going to go in the top 10. We'll see. This is the time of year where everybody's a first round pick, and there's no way this guy can get out of the top 20. But only 20 guys can go. So I would say for me, Steve, we're going to go through a couple of names in the 1st round, a couple in the mid rounds, and a couple we like later. My favorite receiver in this entire class will probably be either Chris Olave or Jameson Williams. Now, different circumstance, different players. Okay, Jameson Williams, certainly a name that a lot of Patriots fans are familiar with. Tore his knee up at the national championship game. I know he's walking and starting to do some movements, which is great, but he's probably a guy that will be on the shelf, until at least midway, if not later into the season. You might have lost him for the whole year, but this is someone who would be a top 10 pick and probably the first receiver taken if he hadn't gotten hurt. Really explosive, a ton of speed, a fun player to watch, really kind of fits what today's NFL offenses are looking for. But for me, and obviously the Patriots could use a lot of that, right? They could use some explosive talent and some speed on offense. But someone like Chris Olave, for me, Ohio State receiver, would be a tremendous fit as well, because Chris Olave, for one, he ran faster than most people thought he was going to, but he plays all over the field. He's a great route runner. And to me, I just feel like he's the type of player that could come into this offense. He wouldn't have to be the one right away. The Patriots have other receivers, but he could get a role and then build on that from there. What do you think about Chris Olave and anybody else that you want to discuss?
Well, he's a great route runner, and I think that, he can run at all 3, I guess, levels of the field. He's very good in the short, the intermediate, and the deep part of the field. And you're right. I did not think he was going to run as fast as he did.
Yep.
And, I know a lot of Patriots fans were hoping that they would go wide receiver in the 1st round. And a lot of people were kind of hoping he'd be there at 21. I think after his combine performance, I think that the chances of him being at 21, I think, went down quite a bit.
I agree. His combine definitely helped him make some money. I would say he is a realistic option, but there's no guarantee. And
right. I think that Prior to the combine, I thought the chances of him being around at 21 were pretty good for the Patriots if they wanted to, go for a wide receiver at 21.
Yep.
I just, I'm not that confident that he'll be there now. And the other guy, Jameson Williams, who you mentioned earlier, he's kind of in the same boat with Mechie. He tore his knee up in the national championship game, but boy, you talk about explosive. And, once he kicks it into that high gear, he just leaves cornerbacks in the dust.
Yeah.
And he had, I believe it was 11 touchdowns of 30 yards or more last year. I mean, when you're talking explosive, that's unbelievable. But, he's in a different boat, obviously. I think he's still going to go in the first round. But again, if you're going to bring him in with a first round draft pick, it has to be with the realization that he might not play this year.
Yeah, which is tough, which is really tough. And Bill Belichick has talked about how damaging it is to young players to miss that early OTA minicamp session. And some of these guys were talking about that would be the case, right? So that's really definitely concerning. And, that's why, the talent level is there with them, right? Chris Olave, for me, if I go back to him real quick, really clean player. You watch him, really smooth. He can create separation all over the field. And that's really what Mac Jones needs, Steve. He needs someone who can separate and get open quickly. And, the Patriots really could use a slot, a really true slot. Jacoby Myers is a good, solid player, but he's not the athletic profile for what this offense really needs to become more dangerous. Okay. And so Olave is certainly in that range. One more name I want to throw out to you in the first round, and someone I really, really like watching, is Penn State's Jahan Dotson. Smaller player, very quick, kind of, one of those guys that can make you kind of miss in a phone booth, Steve. But someone who can get open quick, can make a play after he catches the ball. He can catch the ball down the field. He has some of the best hands in the entire draft. Some guys just look different when they catch the ball. Dotson just snatches it out of the air. It looks like DeAndre Hopkins. I know they're different kind of players, but some guys just catch the ball differently than others, and you see that with Dotson. And you could see him going deep. You can see him going shallow cross over the middle. You could see him going on slants. I just love the way he separates. I just think his explosiveness could be an intriguing element in the slot for the Patriots if they go that direction in the first round.
Yeah, and again, the one, factor each one of these guys that you mentioned has is the yards after the catch, and it's something I think this offense has lacked the last couple of years, and it's something they really need.
Yep.
Dotson, like you said, he's a hand catcher. He doesn't let the ball get into his body. He seems to snatch it out of the air, and he's got really quickness, off the line where he gets open immediately. Something you mentioned as well. He creates separation right away, and once he gets the ball in his hand, he has that speed to break away, and he really drops the ball. I think he's another guy. I think if you're going to draft him, I think it would have to be using a first-round draft pick.
Right. And I think Dotson, to me, very realistic chance that he's there at 21. I think that's right where his sweet spot starts. Will be 21. I could see the Packers someone like the Packers getting him at 22. I could see him going late into the first round. I can't see him getting out of 3-4 picks inside of the second round. I just think he's too good. He's going to go into that 20 to 35 range, Steve, in my opinion. But if the Patriots move back and collect, a second or third round pick, say they move back 6, 7 spots, 8 spots, and they can pick up someone there, I would have no problem with that. Again, I'll go back to something that I said in a previous show. I really, really like these guys that we're talking about. I would love Olave or Dotson on the Patriots. Jameson Williams, Garrett Wilson. All those guys would be great players. I also could make a pretty strong case that the Patriots should go best player available. I don't care what position it is at 21. And then you can get a receiver in rounds 2 or 3, like we're going to talk about some guys here. And maybe that just helps you make you it's a better football team when you have the best players available, and that's Bill's philosophy. That's Ozzie Newsome. The moment a team starts drafting on need alone is usually where they take a big swing and miss. And I know that Bill's not going to do that, but it's it's a hard process for these NFL front offices to. They're rating all these players, right, Steve? And then they're stacking their boards, and then they got to figure out, okay, is it going to be are the Patriots going to take Zion Johnson, the guard from Boston College, or are they going to take Jahan Dotson, like we're talking about? And that's a decision that's why it's a tough job to have, Steve, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that all falls out. For me, second round guys, I love several of these players. George Pickens from Georgia. I'll start with him. Just a really fascinating player. For me, he has size, he has speed, he has a little burst, he has good hands. He has an incredible catch radius. Really can make some explosive plays. I think that Pickens, for me, obviously there was an injury issue with him, but he seems to be back now. I think he recovered pretty quickly too. And you just see it when you watch Georgia, and Georgia was on a lot of channels this year with them being so good. I just feel like, for me, he just sticks out, and he just seems kind of like a guy that you want to go to war with. He plays with a lot of energy and just kind of he almost has like that badass defensive back attitude. You know what I'm saying? So I love the way he plays, Steve. And I think in the second round, hit someone like him, John Mechie, who you already mentioned. I think both of those guys could be fun players in the second round and good options for the Patriots.
Yeah, Pickens, all those guys from Georgia just seem so athletic at the combine, and yeah, there was that injury concern, but I think guys are recovering from ACLs a lot better, in the last few years than probably they did. So I wouldn't be.
Yeah, Pickens tore his ACL in the spring last year, and then he was playing at the end of the season. That's crazy. It's not what it used to be. That's for sure. Not that it's not a concern, but it's just much better than it used to be.
Yeah, Pickens, Mechie, who we mentioned. Do you think Treylon Burks from Arkansas would be available in round 2?
It's tough because he tested really poorly, at least for a receiver. He is. You have to qualify this with Treylon Burks, right? He is basically. He kind of reminds me of almost like an Aaron Hernandez type, but a little bit more athletic. Because he's big. He's 225. But I could see a team like the Patriots being interested in someone like him because you can move him around. He can do so many different things. But he did test poorly, so people, I think, are going back to the film and wondering. But if you watch him. If you watch him, you would say, man, he's really pulling away from a lot of these other players, right? He stands out. His play speed doesn't worry you. His time speed does. So that's where these evaluators are going to have to make their decision. I am not someone who would take Treylon Burks in the first round. I just don't. I don't like him enough. There's a lot of guys that fit the athletic profile that I think this Patriots team needs, and I just don't think Burks is one of them. And if he was available in the second round, we can have a conversation about that. But I still look at someone for the Patriots are going to go for a receiver. I think they need to target someone who's going to be able to get open quick and add a little bit more speed, a little bit of, has a little more twitch to him. And that's why I mentioned Olave and Dotson before and left Burks to the side. What are your thoughts on Burks? And would you take him in the first round?
No, I wouldn't. There's just, they went this route a couple of years ago with a bigger guy that they thought, had all this separation.
Right.
I think they might be a little gun shy about doing that again.
Do you think they're gun shy about taking a receiver in the first round in general after that?
I tend to doubt that they're going to. That's just their MO, that they usually don't do that. A couple of years ago, I was surprised that they did that. So I'm kind of thinking they're not going to do it. Is it completely out of the realm of possibility? No.
Yeah, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but I don't think
I would love to be a fly on the wall and see their draft board.
Mm-hmm.
But, because I think, like you mentioned at the outset, I think they're going to go best player available, and the best player available on their board will obviously depend on, who they value the most. But I just don't see them going for a wide receiver in the first round. There are some guys, that I would love to see if they decide to do that. And another guy you mentioned earlier, Garrett Wilson, is another one of those kind of slot guys that I think would be really, really good in this offense. I just don't know whether he'll be around for them.
No, I think honestly, Steve, I think he's gonna. I'll be shocked if he gets any farther, Garrett Wilson, than 10 to the Jets. I really just can't see him going much farther than that. And someone like Drake London from USC, again, I'll put him in that same category. I've seen some people compare him to N'Keal Harry. He's way more athletic than N'Keal Harry. And look, N'Keal Harry had some good tape in college, but there was a lot of questions about him being able to separate athletically, heading into the combine, and he ran pretty well, and it pushed him into that first round. But there was a lot of question marks around that, and I don't get the exact same vibes with Burks. I think Burks is a little bit different. I think he's gonna be a better player too, but I don't know. I just don't think that's what this offense needs, Steve. I just don't. If we go into the second round. We've talked about Skye Moore from Western Virginia. Are you still high on him? Where do you think he shakes? Because to me, I really, really liked him early. Then it seemed like everyone started to really like him.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing him in like fringe first round conversation, and I was like, that's too rich for my blood.
Yeah.
If the Patriots took him in the second round, or if they were to trade back a little bit and they get him late second, early third, I think that's a good range for him. I'm just not taking him in the first round. Tell me a little bit about him, if you and what you feel about him as a player.
Well, he's another guy that I liked early in the process. 3-year starter, really good production, and we talked about this so many times. That the kind of guy that thrives in this offense is that slot guy, has very quick, very sudden off the line of scrimmage, really good footwork. He can get away from press coverage really well. He can, he plays at a good speed, and, he knows how to work the field. He's not afraid to go over the middle, and he'll do the dirty work. But I would not take him in the first round. Even round 2, I think, is even a little rich. I thought he was a third round kind of guy. But since the combine, his draft stock is skyrocketing because, like you, I was reading about people talking about him now being, borderline first rounder, and I don't think he's that guy.
No, I think that some of that. Sometimes I feel like when people are doing mock drafts, and I'm not criticizing anybody. Mock drafts are fun, right? But sometimes I feel like it's like people have like a bug in their ear. They feel like they have to put players up high because of they're a little prisoner of the moments, and I get that. But to me, I look at Skye Moore and I think he's a really intriguing player. I could see him as a good fit here for the Patriots. Just I'm not taking him until the second round, at least. And even then, and even in the second round, there's several other players that I would put ahead of him, like Mechie, like you talked about. And to me, like that, Mechie is a really intriguing guy for a lot of reasons, and you talked about it. He did tear his ACL like his teammate Jameson Williams, but it was earlier, so his timetable is a little bit more ahead, which is nice. And his value, Steve, right around that pick at 54, for the Patriots, I think would be pretty solid there. So if they did go best player available, let's say they go with a cornerback that falls, or a linebacker, or an offensive tackle in that first round. Well, if you take a pretty, one of those kind of, top 3 players at their position, at one of those positions I just listed in the first round, and then you swoop back over and you get John Mechie or somebody in the second round, you're off to a pretty freaking good start. So he's a fun one. Do you have anybody in the later rounds that you like?
I haven't watched a ton of tape, but I've heard some people talk about Khalil Shakir from Boise State.
Yep. And in fact, I want to say it was either Matt Groh or Bill Belichick. It was one of them who was kind of keeping an eye on him at his pro day the other day.
Yeah, and again, I haven't watched a lot of tape of him. I don't watch a lot of the guys from out west as much.
Yep.
But everything that I've seen about him, he kind of, he fits that bill. He's smart. He's very instinctive. You know, he even played, I think, some Wildcat quarterback. So, you know, and he's another one. You know, he plucks the ball out of the air. He doesn't let it get into his body. And, you know, he can play special teams in return. If he's a guy that's around later in the draft, I would be intrigued to see what they could do with him.
Yeah, and I think that he's someone to keep an eye on. I know Bo Melton from Rutgers is another name that's been popular in Patriots drafts, and I think for good reason. I mean, he's he has a lot of bloodlines to Rutgers. His family, both his parents, I believe, went there and played sports there. He had a brother that was there. He's a senior. He was a 2-time captain. Has a good amount of athletic ability, but he's not. It's not, I would say, like outrageous, but he's probably like a lower end receiver and someone who can contribute on special teams. But that's what you're looking for, in a late round pick. Just someone to kind of keep an eye on.